Okay, well, welcome everybody. Nick, it's great to have you come and talk to our Student Advisory Board. This board is made up of students who take part in the programme, are involved in working options, and they're very excited to have you today with lots of great questions to ask you about your career. Obviously, this is a really important part for us. Working Options in Education is an employability skills programme. And we work with students aged 14 to 19 to really help them with their career choices, give them aspiration, make them sure that they feel they've got a place in whatever career that they choose to have, and they understand the skills they need to get there. So it's great to have somebody like yourself come and join us today. For those, I'm sure you've all done your homework about Nick, but he's had an incredible career so far. He's a BBC Radio1Xtra presenter. He does 5 Live sport, DJing. He does voiceovers, probably a very familiar voice for MTV UK charts, and does all sorts of things around football, Arsenal, breakdown he does, the 100, Red Bull, and I think he's done some work in rugby as well. So, you know, an all-rounder, done some extraordinary stuff so far. But more importantly, I'd like to ask Nick to give a sort of brief bio of himself to you guys. You know, it's been extraordinary where you've come from and what you've achieved so far. Nick.
Yeah, thank you very much. My internet connection's up and down at the moment, just as you introduced me, which is typical. But hopefully it works now and you can all hear what I'm saying. But yeah, it was a great intro. You kind of covered everything, which was really, really nice. But yeah, I work for Arsenal. I work for numerous different parts of the BBC, including Radio1Xtra. You may have heard me thinking I'm hilarious on 1Xtra, playing songs and stuff like that. Bits and pieces on Radio 5 Live as well. If any of you like football, you would have heard me there. And maybe even interviewing footballers and stuff as part of Football Focus, which is a Saturday morning football show on BBC One, which is pretty insane to think that, you know, when I was growing up in South London on free school meals, that I'd be doing a lot of these things that I do now for the BBC. You know, I never would have thought it was imaginable. So to be able to do what I do now as my job, it's pretty incredible, and I feel pretty lucky to be able to call it my job.
That's great. Well, I'm going to kick off the questions because there are a lot that they want to ask you. And if I can ask Ali Khan to ask the questions that you're interested in.
Hi, Nick. Good afternoon.
Hello, mate.
First question is, how did your upbringing in South London influence your DJ bass career?
Growing up in South London, it was tough. Like, I won't pretend. You know, I'm from a place called South Norwood. That's where I grew up, so just outside Croydon. And yeah, like I said, I didn't grow up with loads of money. My parents didn't have lots of money. I was on free school meals when I was at school. But I think it helped shape me quite a lot into the person I am today. And that's just through going to such a multicultural school. I think I went to a school called St. Joseph's College, and you had people from all different walks of life at the school. It was all boys. So I guess wasn't that diverse in that sense, gender wise, but in terms of just like the amount of different people from different backgrounds and different cultures. And I'm thankful for that, because I think it really shaped my interests. It really shaped me to be open to lots of people that come from different backgrounds, because I feel like that's important in what I do, especially when I'm interviewing people and have to kind of understand a different point of view and a different way of life. But just music wise, if we're just going to take it there, like, you know, I grew up in the same place as Stormzy, I guess. You know, he was obviously a kid when I was at school, but you know, Stormzy's from Thornton Heath, which is next door to South Norwood, and he went to school. I think it was called Harris Academy by the time he went there, but it used to be called Stanley Tech when I was growing up. And you know, Krept and Conan are from the same area as well, so you can tell it's a big melting pot for UK music. And I felt this when I was at school. There's an actor called Arnold Ocheng. He was in my year at school, and he was in Grange Hill, and he now makes music himself. His name's Snaky Man, and his acting career is kicking off a lot more than his music career. He's been recently in a film with Reese Witherspoon, and you know, he's doing really, really well for himself. But yeah, to answer your question, growing up in South London molded me musically massively, but more so down to my older brothers. I've got two older brothers, both of them like hip hop music, especially my middle brother. My middle brother's a battle rapper now, and like I shared a bedroom with him, so, and I'm the youngest, so I had no choice as to what we listened to in the bedroom because I was the younger brother in it, so I just have to listen to whatever he puts on. So he used to listen to a lot of Wu-Tang, a lot of Gangstar. It was mainly US rap back then because the UK stuff wasn't, you know, it wasn't as healthy, the scene, as it is now. But because of the stuff he listened to, that was my entry point into music, and then it kind of went from there.
Also, the second question is, what GCSEs and A levels did you take at school or college?
It's an interesting one for me, GCSEs and A levels, because I didn't do A levels at college. I did a BTEC. I don't even know if they still exist anymore.
Yeah,
I did a national diploma.
Yeah.
So it's basically that. I did a national diploma in music technology at college. But that was the second time round at college. The first time round, so straight out of school, I went to college, and I did computer networking, and I just hated it. It was not what I wanted to do at all. I thought it was what I wanted to do until I started doing it. And I was just like, I can't do this for the rest of my life, sitting in front of a computer, which is quite ironic because, you know, that's kind of what we all do now anyway, with our phones and all of that. But like, I didn't want to work in that. And, you know, I dropped out. I ended up working loads of jobs, loads of different jobs as well. You know, you name it, I've done it. And then I decided that I needed to have a career because I didn't have a career. I didn't have a plan. And that's when I went back to college to do music technology. And that's because I liked music. I wanted to be a sound engineer originally. So kind of like, you know, miking up drum kits and working in a studio and stuff like that. And then I discovered radio through doing that. But GCSE wise, it's funny because my parents moved house at the worst possible time. So I grew up, as I said, in South London until year 10. And then my parents decided to move to Portsmouth, which is, you know, if you don't know where Portsmouth is, it's like the south coast of England. My parents moved there in between year 10 and 11 for me. So they waited for my brother to finish year 11 and then they decided to move. And I was like, cheers, thanks guys. So when I went to my new school, there was a lot of GCSEs that were different in terms of like different examining boards. So stuff that I'd already started, I couldn't finish. So I had to like rush a lot of things. But when I was in my school in South London, I picked business studies, geography, and I want to say RE as my options in GCSE. And the only reason I picked business studies is because it was something different. You know, I do a lot of talks in schools now with BBC Bite Size, and the options that are on offer now are so much better than when I was at school. Like if it was up, if I could go again, I would love to have done media studies, you know, it would have made total sense, but it wasn't on offer when I was at school. So that's why I did business studies, because I just thought it's something different. You know, I don't really know what I want to do when I leave school. Business sounds good, so I'm going to pick that.
Brilliant, thank you.
For answering the questions, thank you.
All good. Some good questions there, man. Tough act to follow. Who's next?
Oh, Jeremiah, you're next.
Well, let's do it, Jerry. What you
Save
got?
all the good questions for first. Hi, Nick. I hope you're all right.
I'm good, mate. I'm good. Whereabouts in the world are you?
I am in Barnet currently. Barnet,
Okay.
Southgate College.
I used to live in Barnet. I used to live in East Barnet.
Yeah, it was funny that you said business, because I'm actually studying business now for the exact reason, just because I wanted something different.
Yeah. It makes sense.
Hey.
Listen, when you're look, I don't expect you guys all here. Some of you might know what you want to do, and that's totally fine. But like, if you don't know what you want to do, don't panic, because, you know, I didn't know what I wanted to do for a long time, and some argue that I still don't, which is why I do what I do now, you know.
Yeah. Well, my first question for you would be, what kind of skills do you need to go into presenting?
It's a question that I get asked a lot. You know, what can I do to become a presenter, or, you know, how did you do it so I can replicate that? But the honest answer, when it comes to presenting is just, there's luck involved, there's timing. Like for me, for example, like when I eventually got my foot in the door at Radio1Xtra, that's where I started my journey in media, and I'm still there 12 years later. But when I got my foot in the door, I started out kind of making tea and just like being an intern, and then I ended up working in production on other people's shows. You know, I used to work on Mr. Jam's show. I think that's where I started, and he used to kind of talk to me on air, and the management liked how it sounded, and then eventually they offered me a show. But I wasn't trying to get a show. It was pure luck and timing, and that's what I mean. Like so much of that happens in this industry, and if you speak to, you know, numerous presenters, if you know some of your favorite presenters and people like that, like they will all have a different story about how they got into the industry. But the one thing I will say is, like, it's never been easier to practice and hone your craft, because all of you guys here, you know, I'm certain are all, you know, good enough to unlike when I was growing up, you can all film yourselves and, you know, do all stuff on your phones and stuff like that. So like a lot of people have YouTube channels, or, you know, they're on TikTok or Snap or Insta, and they're making their own content. And the more that you do things like that, the better you become at it. Whereas, you know, as I say, when I was growing up, you had to go and get on community radio, or you had to wait until you were at college to be able to get involved with, if your college was lucky enough to have like a internal TV kind of channel or whatever, you could do that. But, you know, now just do it is what I say. If you're interested in becoming a presenter, you have to be good for starters, but you have to be doing it to become good. You know, don't just wait around hoping for someone to pluck you out of obscurity, because often that won't happen.
Yeah. Well, my second question would be, I think Ali Khan asked something similar, but I guess in more wider perspective, what are some of the challenges you faced, like, to get to the point you are now?
Boy, in media, there's challenges every day, man. Let me tell you, like, even when you're from the outside, people think you're doing great, you know, because, you know, people see your social media, they'll see Instagram, or they'll see, you know, TikTok or whatever, like all the things you're putting up on there. But you have to remember, like, that's the best 5% of everybody's lives. Even like the top celebrities, yeah, like they're still only giving you the top 5% of their lives, right? So you have to remember that. So for me, people often think, oh, because I'm on, you know, 1Xtra and I've got this career and blah, 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 that, like, you know, I can just phone up a different part of the BBC and like say, right, I want a job doing this. But kind of that's not how it works, man. To get the next job is always a challenge. You know, even now I still got to do screen tests, I still got to do auditions, I still got to speak to people and network and do this and do that. You know, your CV and building your CV obviously is great and it's important, but, you know, just because you've got that initial job doesn't mean the challenge ends there. It just carries on all the time. But the biggest challenge is probably getting your foot in the door in the first place. You know, I won't lie. If any of you guys are looking to go into media, and I'm sure, you know, a lot of you are quite interested, which is the reason we're here today doing this, getting that initial shot, it is really, really hard. And it's even harder now compared to when I got in, because I kind of got in through the back door when the back door was still a bit of a route. Like, because now at the BBC, you can only get in. This is just the BBC, by the way. Lots of different companies offer different schemes, but I can speak for the BBC because I know it the best. You know, you have to go through the official channels. You have to take the official route. You have to do work experience you know, be plucked out through all the people that apply. Whereas when I got in, as I said earlier, making tea and as a bit of an intern, I actually applied for a job as a broadcast assistant, which is like the entry-level job in radio. I didn't get the job, but then once you've had an interview at the BBC, you can request feedback. I requested feedback. They were like, you just need a little bit more experience. So then I just cheekily replied to the email saying like, well, can I come in and get some? And the boss at the time was like, yeah, all right. But that kind of stuff can't happen anymore, which is frustrating for people like yourselves, because, you know, if you could do that, I'm sure all of you would. But it's all about networking and meeting people anyway. But yeah, getting your foot in the door in the first place is the biggest challenge. Were you looking to be a presenter then, Jerry? Is that what you want to do, mate?
Well, I would say I'm someone who's like, obviously I love playing football and I love like performing arts. I love business. So I would say, and media has quite interested me in the last couple of years. So I would say quite broad right now. I haven't decided at all.
Yeah. Well, like I said earlier, man, like it takes time to decide what you want to do. Some people, they know right away. Some of your friends might have an idea of what they want to do, and that's cool. But for you, run your own race. Don't panic. You'll work it out. But just like the one thing I always say is like the things that you mentioned there, a lot of the time you can turn hobbies into a job. You just don't really realize it when you're growing up. I didn't realize it. So if there is something that you enjoy doing, just like research it and have a look and see if there's any jobs or any kind of career path that takes that into account.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
All good, bro.
Thanks, Jeremiah. Good questions then. And over to you, Sienna.
All right, hi, Nick.
Hello.
2 questions. And the first one is, was there a specific person or moment that inspired you to host shows?
Oh, so was there a specific person or moment? So, as I said, my parents moved to Portsmouth when I was 15, about to turn 16. And at the time, when you've grown up in a certain area, the idea of being taken away from your friends and everything you know, kind of, it hurts you, innit? Especially when you're young, you don't want to do that because you have to make new friends and blah, blah, blah. But actually moving to Portsmouth was a real catalyst, I think, because for 2 reasons. The first is that I didn't know what I wanted to do when I lived in London, right? I always liked music and stuff like that. But at that point, I wasn't thinking about music or media as a job or a career. But when I moved to Portsmouth, that's where I met kind of the first person that I worked with who got me into radio. And he's still one of my best friends now, actually, a guy called Mike. We used to live together, actually, up until a few years ago. But he now works at Acast. I'm sure lots of you listen to podcasts, and that most of the podcasts you listen to are hosted by Acast. So he's kind of made his way in the industry as well. But he had a radio show in Portsmouth on a community station called Express FM. And he invited me down one day because I was from London. Like back then, as I was alluding to earlier, like the grime scene, you guys all know about, grime and different genres of music now. But back then, grime was only really known in London. So when I moved to Portsmouth, nobody really knew about it. They didn't know about any of the artists or the scene or anything like that. So he had his radio show, which was a kind of like a Friday night hip hop and R&B show. And then he said to me, like, oh, do you want to bring some tracks? So then I brought, some grime, and he was like, I really like this. Like, can you come next week? Can you keep doing it? And then in the end, we co-hosted the show together. So he was definitely a person he got me into radio, definitely. Before that, I wasn't doing it. And then we went on to become kind of a bit of a DJ duo. I'd spent 2 summers DJing in Malia, me and him, which was crazy, as I'm sure you can imagine. So yeah, that we kind of forged the friendship out of this love of radio and love of music. So yeah, without him, I definitely wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now.
Okay, thanks for answering that. The next question is, what advice would you give to young people who have no connection in an industry that they aspire to work in?
Yeah, this is like me. And I think this is how, me and Rachel ended up hooking up anyway, because I didn't know anybody in media. Like I said, I grew up in a place where a lot of people don't go on to have careers like media or especially, I think it's changed a bit now. People, again, because of the internet and social media, it doesn't necessarily matter where you grew up, but before there was definitely negative connotations attached to growing up in council housing or, in certain parts of a city that might not necessarily have the greatest reputation and things like that. But thankfully that's starting to change. And it actually got even worse for me, moving from London to Portsmouth. London is like the epicenter of music and media in the UK, right? I think that's fair to say, even though it's getting better now in different places, which is great, because that's needed to happen. Because before, everybody had to move to London to be successful or get a job in certain industries. But now in media, I can speak for, Leeds has got Channel 4 now, Manchester's got Media City UK, which has got, loads of the BBC. There's like ITV and stuff there as well. There's stuff in Glasgow, Pacific Quay. There's stuff in Bristol. So it's moving everywhere, which is great. But in Portsmouth, there was no media. So I was I was at an even bigger kind of negative by going down there. So for me, part of the reason why I went to uni, and I studied radio production at uni, I went to Westminster Uni. I loved radio through, you know, Mike getting me into it and getting the show at Express FM. But I didn't really know if I could make it as a somebody in radio, because I just thought to myself, you know, I don't have any links for starters. Most people that make it in media and music, you know, they've got a dad or an uncle or somebody who kind of gets their foot in the door initially. So I don't have any links. I need to earn money to live. And I live in a city where, you know, there is no media other than Express FM, which was a community station. So you on a community station, you don't get paid. You're doing it all for free. It's not a viable career. So then I decided I was going to do a uni course in London, and part of the reason for doing the uni course, the radio production course, was that I loved radio, but it was also just to move back to London, because at that time for me, I needed to be in London to get a job in radio. So I moved back to London, and by now I was 20. Trying to think, I was 20. I think I was 21 at that point. So I'm already a bit older than most of the people I went to uni with. And the reason for that is, like I said earlier, I went to college, dropped out, worked jobs, and then went back. So I was like, I need to make sure that when I finish uni, I've got a job to walk into, because I don't want to move back to Portsmouth, because then I'd have to get a part-time job or a full-time job to support myself, and then I won't be able to chase the dream of working in radio as hard as I want to. So I started applying for jobs at the BBC in my first year of uni straight away, because I didn't want to be in a position where when I left, I didn't have a job, because that's what happened with lots of people I went to uni with. You know, they was taking it easy, having a laugh at uni, which you should definitely do, by the way. Like, I'm not discouraging anybody from doing that. Like, make the most of your time at uni. And I did have a laugh at uni. I was the DJ in my students' union, so believe me, I had a laugh. But yeah, I just had to like knuckle down and try and get that job at the end of it, because like you said, I didn't have any links or any connections, so I needed to try and forge them. So for me, it was doing things like, I went to the Student Radio Awards, which is an awards ceremony that happens every year. And when I was there, I made sure I spoke to as many people as possible. I went to the Student Radio Conference as well. Again, did the same thing. Whenever there was an opportunity to meet or network with people, I would always make the most of it. And the big mistake that people make, actually, believe it or not, and I say this now as somebody who is a presenter, but people often think that when you go to these type of events, the presenters are the people that you need to speak to. Oh, you know, that presenter's over there, so I'm going to go and speak to them. But the presenters, us, we're not the people that can give you jobs. We're not the people that can give you opportunities. You know, we're the people that you might know because you might see our stuff or hear our stuff. But actually, it's the producers, it's the editors, it's the execs. So my advice to you, my long-winded answer to you, is that you just have to network and make the most of opportunities when they come along. And I know it sounds difficult, because it's not always easy to network with people, and sometimes it means sending random emails out of the blue, which can be quite daunting and a little bit kind of cold callery, but you just have to do it. And depending on where you are in the country, you know, if there are events like the Student Radio Awards, for whatever field you want to get into, because obviously I know I'm talking a lot about radio, but that's, you know, my thing. There will be equivalent events for whatever it is you want to get into as well. So just do that research, try and get to those events, and then try and speak to as many people as you can, because you never know who's going to go on to become what, and you never know who's going to be able to give you your next opportunity.
Thanks for that advice. It's really insightful and helpful.
That's all right.
My final question is, what's the main thing that motivates you?
The main thing that motivates me is well, there's two things that motivate me, actually. The first thing is the need to be good at radio. And I know that sounds really nerdy, but that's because, like, I did radio production, I worked behind the scenes. Like, you know, for me, radio is like a real skill, and it's a real honor to be on the radio. You know, especially the BBC. You know, whatever people think about the BBC as a corporation, there's no denying its importance and its global appeal. You can go anywhere in the world, anywhere, let me tell you, and you say you work at the BBC and people know where you work. instantly. So like, you know, the pride of working at the BBC is part of it, but also just being good, like I say, because for me, I'm a real student of radio, and even when I'm like that annoying guy, like if I'm in the car with my friends or in the car with my other half or whatever, and a presenter's doing a link, I'm like listening in a different way to how the presenter is approaching the link. And I'll be there saying, oh, they should have done this like that, or why didn't they do this, blah, blah, blah. And they're just like, we're just trying to listen to the radio, mate. Like, you know, stop over analyzing everything. It's the same, you know, because I DJ as well, not as much as I used to. My decks behind me there, I can't even remember the last time I turned them on. But yeah, when I go to a club, it's the same thing. Like, I'll go to a nightclub and I'll overanalyze the DJ set and, you know, all of that. So there's that, but also the listeners, you know, like, this sounds again really geeky, but like, without the listeners, without the people who tune into the radio show is nothing, you know, without those people. And I remember that every time I fade up the mic. Although sometimes I do forget people are listening, you know, to completely contradict myself. Sometimes like I'll fade up the mic and I'll just be like talking rubbish. And then I'm like, no, I can't believe people are tuning in, listening to me talking about, I don't know, sweet corn or whatever it is that I decide to talk about in that link, and actually find it entertaining. So, yeah, and I think the last couple of years, the pandemic has really hammered that home, because, you know, we've had a lot of people listening through really dire times, and sometimes the radio, especially in lockdown one, sounds like we're talking about films now, doesn't it? But, you know, in lockdown one, it was really hard for a lot of people, because that was when nobody could go out. You couldn't even see your friends. You know, you're allowed to go out once a day, things like that. And the radio was often the only company that people had. So, you know, remembering that and feeling privileged to be on the radio at that time is kind of a thing that really, really inspires and keeps me going. But yeah, just on that, actually, like, that first lockdown was honestly mad, because I was considered a key worker, which in itself is, to me, seems bananas, because, you know, I'm just someone who talks rubbish on the radio, but hey, I'm a key worker. But it was the fact that like nobody was out, and I'm sure you guys have all seen BBC Broadcasting House, but that's where Radio1Xtra is. It's like when you watch BBC News, if you've ever seen it, it's where that big glass building they show on the news. But anyway, like, 1Xtra is at the top of that building. So we still had to go in to do our radio shows, even in that first lockdown. And I was walking down Oxford Street, which, you know, again, most of you have probably been to Oxford Street. If not, you would have seen it on TV or whatever. But like, it's a packed street, you know, like you can't walk down it without bumping into people or whatever. But it was empty. No shops were open. There was nobody around. It would have been a good time to, you know, film a movie, but yeah, there was nobody around, and the only place that was open was the Marks and Spencer's supermarket, and it was just, yeah, it was crazy. But I digress. Anyway, good questions so far. I'm enjoying it. And also, if I'm saying anything, and any of you guys, you know, that may have already asked a question or whatever, want to jump in, or you don't agree, or you want to challenge me on anything, or you think I'm talking rubbish, feel free to jump in. I'm up for it.
Thanks, Sienna. Some good questions there. Over to you now, Liam.
Hi, Nick. All right.
Yeah, good.
My first question is, did you ever have any doubts on your journey, like, to where you are now?
All the time. Like, I think everybody has doubts in everything that they do. You know, I said earlier on, I still have to do kind of auditions, screen tests, as they're called, for presenters. You know, I still have to prove myself all the time. And then sometimes I think to myself, like, is it worth it? You know, like, it's a constant battle between the enjoyment of what I do, but then also the stress of getting that next contract, because a lot of people don't realize, you know, when you're a presenter, most of the time you're working contract to contract. You know, my 1Xtra contract, for example, is a year long, and then at the end of that year, I don't know if it's going to get renewed. Thankfully, I've just been renewed as we speak, as we sit and do this. So, you know, you've got another year of me. But you know, like, you don't know if it's going to get renewed, so there's that panic there. And then when I speak to, you know, my friends who you know, have more traditional jobs or whatever, they're all kind of super comfortable. They can get, this sounds really boring now because I don't want to bore you all to death, but like, you know, my friends, they can do things like get a mortgage really easily, or they can do this because of the jobs that they have. You know, they get paid in the traditional way. When you're a presenter and you go to a mortgage advisor and they have a look at the way you get paid, and it's like mad different kind of, you know, numbers every month, they're like, what's going on with this? You know, that's really boring, but that's like real life stuff that people don't necessarily think about when they think of, you know, your favorite presenter. But that you know, I speak to a lot of my colleagues who I work with, and they've gone through similar stuff as well. So yeah, like I have doubts all the time, but I think at the same time it's quite healthy to have doubts in a way, because you don't want to be too comfortable in anything that you do. You know, you want to, there's that fine line, isn't there? You want to be comfortable enough to be like, this is my career, this is what I want to do, this is what I'm going to do. But then equally, you don't want to be, you know, phoning it in, for want of a better phrase. You don't want to be so comfortable that you're just like, feet up, you know, I can do whatever I want. And then you lose the hunger and you lose the passion for it, because, you know, that for me is when alarm bells start ringing.
Thank you. And because of obviously the small amount of opportunities that young people have now, do you reckon there's anything that people like you with a big influence can change that and give younger people opportunities?
Yeah, it's frustrating and it's hard. You know, I was sitting in the same position as you guys, as I've said earlier on. You know, I just wanted an opportunity, because that's all you want, right? All you want is an opportunity to try and prove yourself. But like, trying to get that opportunity, that first opportunity, like I said again earlier, is the hardest thing to get. But having said that, now there are a lot more opportunities with like work experience, internships, traineeships. Yes, you have to go through the official channels. Yes, you have to like prove yourself and potentially go up against thousands of others, but there are a lot of different schemes on offer. And the good thing now, actually, and it gets bad press by certain kind of newspapers, because those newspapers are stupid, but like things like schemes that are weighted towards people from a more ethnically diverse background to get into things, you know, that's needed in particular areas of media, most definitely. But not just when it comes to skin color, when it comes to your background and upbringing as well. I know ITV have recently just put out a scheme that is open to kind of people that come from traditionally working class backgrounds, which I think is great, because on the one hand, you know, the ethnically diverse thing that did need to happen, but also what about the class issue as well? You know, that's definitely something that needs to be addressed, and it's hard, because if we're looking at it from a purely visual perspective, right, it's easy if you have a diversity issue when it comes to people from different backgrounds, but it's not so easy to tell you've got a class issue, because you don't know where people come from just by looking at them. Do you know what I mean? So thankfully, that's something that's going to change. But in terms of me, you know, I always try and speak to the boss about the boss, you know, the boss of 1Xtra, about what I think when it comes to people that work on shows, but also presenters. You know, we've got less sway over, you know, different presenters that come in, because that's, you know, he's going to make those calls. But when it comes to people working on shows and working in the office, I'll always feedback, and I'll always say, you know, this person's really good, you should give them an opportunity, and blah blah blah. So yeah, we can't do loads, but like the conversations that I've had with other 1Xtra presenters is that like those guys do the same thing as well. They try to feedback as much as possible to try and get as many people through the door, and young people like yourselves as well, because, you know, 1Xtra is a radio station that's aimed at 16 to 24-year-olds, right? That's the target demographic for 1Xtra. A lot of the people that work at 1Xtra are out of the target demographic, and for me, that's not right. You know, that needs to change and that needs to get better. But the BBC, you know, and I'll say this to Tim Davie, who's the Director General of the BBC. So, you know, I don't mind if he says it, if he sees it. you know, for me, the people who are, you know, not running the boss has to have a certain level of experience, right? We get that. So the boss is going to be somebody who's traditionally a bit older, but like the people on the ground, I feel like they have to be as close to your target demographic as possible, so that your target demographic, you know, could speak to them in a way. You know, it's like, you know, you guys you're not gonna talk to your parents' friends about stuff that you think is cool or stuff that you like, you know what I mean? Whereas if someone is more close to your age, you might speak to them about those things. So for me, yeah, that has to change, and it is changing slowly. But my old boss used to say that the BBC is like you got to imagine the BBC, yeah, like a cargo ship. Yeah, to turn around a cargo ship, it takes time, innit? It's not like a speedboat where you can just go and turn around like and just go the other way. That cargo ship takes a long time to turn around. So things are changing, but you know, slowly but surely, and hopefully, you know, in a few years' time, there'll be even more opportunities for young people from all walks of life, because yeah, that's definitely needed.
Great question.
Thank you.
Great answer, Nick. And actually, interesting, we do work with ITV. So yeah, and it's right. And a big part of what we're trying to do is work with businesses to try and shift that dial, as you say, and really understanding, you know, what talent's out there from all sorts of diverse backgrounds, and try and change the way they recruit. So that's good to hear. It's good to hear. So be reassured, Liam, as well, that we're working very hard on that. Yeah,
and you're down in Bristol as well, so there's a lot of the BBC has moved down to Bristol recently as well. So, you know, I don't know if you want to work in media or for the BBC for that sense, but like, it's always a good place to try and get work experience, because like I said earlier, it is instantly recognizable. You know, and then when you go to get a job somewhere else, you can say you've done work experience at the BBC, and people are just like, you know, they know it straight away.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Right, and finally, we hand over the baton to Pastor.
Is it best till last situation, or you know, no pressure?
Yeah. Hi, Nick. I hope you're doing well.
I'm good, mate.
There's been some great questions about your past and how you've got to where you are. Now, I want to know a bit more about your future. So where do you see yourself in 10 years?
Oh, on a beach, millions of pounds, you know, no. Do you know what? It's a really interesting question for me to answer, because like the easy answer is, you know, presenting match of the day, or, you know, doing something like that, because, you know, I love football, and you know, I'm a big Arsenal fan, although, you know, the less said about that, the better. But, you know, to be completely honest with you, to still have as much of a varied career in 10 years as I do now, because the one thing that I'm scared of, you know, and a lot of people that work in media, the reason we do work in media is because the one thing that we're scared of is doing the same thing every day. And that terrifies me, because I get bored really quickly. You know, if you speak to any of my school teachers, they'll probably tell you the same thing. Nick is easily distracted and all of that. But like, I just love the fact that like on a Monday, I voice the MTV chart, you know, and then on a Tuesday, I might be covering on one-Xtra. On a Wednesday, I might be going to interview a footballer in Newcastle, you know, on a Thursday, I might be DJing at some kind of thing. You know, I love all that, and the idea of doing the same thing every day really, really scares me. So I don't have kind of like a thing. I don't have like in 10 years, I want to be doing that. But the one thing I will say is in 10 years, I want to still be loving what I'm doing, but also just be cherry picking all of this kind of, you know, mad stuff, and picking out the things that I do want to do. So yeah, sorry, I haven't got an exact answer for you.
Actually, great answer.
Yeah,
Yeah. So my next question was, if there's been any events, like a career highlight for you that you'd like to share with us?
God, there's been loads. You know, I've, as I say, been really, really lucky. Like, I guess a big highlight for me. I'll give you a few, because you know that way it can show you the variety of mad stuff that I've done. One big highlight for me was I get to interview lots of people for my radio show, right? And I've interviewed loads of famous people, and that's great. But the most exciting one for me was Jackie Chan. Interviewing Jackie Chan is pretty big, just because if you actually think, because of the size of China and the amount of people that are in China, right? Jackie Chan's probably one of the most famous people in the world, because pretty much everybody knows him in China, and there's billions of people in China. But interviewing him was wild. And the fact that he came in, he had a pinstripe shirt on, and like in the pinstripes was his initials. It was like JC, 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 JC. I was like, that's pretty, pretty decent. And then I've got to introduce. So for radio, for 1Xtra Live, we haven't done it because of the pandemic, but we normally do a concert every year. We did it at the O2 Arena the year before the pandemic started, I think. So I got to introduce Chip on stage at the O2 Arena in front of, however many people fit in the O2 Arena. I think it might be 20,000 people. Trivia though, O2 Arena is not actually the biggest arena in the UK. A lot of people think it is, but the biggest arena in the UK is actually I don't know what it's called now, but the Manchester Arena is the biggest arena in the UK. Pub quiz for you uni guys. So that was pretty cool. And then the other thing would be, and there's been I could be here forever listing them, but I'm trying to like make it relatively quick for you, because the AO Arena, there you go. Nice, Khan. You in Manchester by any chance, or?
Oh no, I literally just searched it up. That's all.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I should have done that as well. Either that, or you work for AO. Just trying to get them plugged. But the other thing is getting the job at Arsenal. Being an Arsenal fan, I've just imagine. You guys might not be football fans. You might be football fans. I don't know, but just imagine something that you've loved your whole life, and then managing to get a job there, and then being part of the fabric of that thing. Sitting with the players or the people that make that thing important, being on the pitch, doing this, doing that. It's all pretty insane when I do it. And the one regret that I have about it actually is that, my granddad's Ghanaian, and he came to England in 51, I think 1951. He came to England, and he settled on Arsenal as the team that he was going to support. And because of that, my dad's an Arsenal fan, I'm an Arsenal fan, my kids will be Arsenal fans because they'll have no choice. And my granddad died when I was in year 8 at school, so he never got to see me working for Arsenal. So like that's the one regret, because he would have like absolutely gone mad for it. So yeah, it's a shame so that he's not around for it, but then equally I kind of remember through my work at Arsenal just how proud he would have been for me being on the pitch at the Emirates and stuff like that. He would have loved it.
Great, thank you for sharing those. Now my next question, you've kind of touched on it. You've spoken about how you were not sure about what you want to go into, but was there like a career you had in mind before you turned into a presenter that you wanted to become?
There was, do you know what? I'll tell you a story. I never had like a career in mind, right? But I said I went back to college. So I did computer networking the first time, didn't like it, dropped out, worked loads of jobs. So like, supermarkets, pubs, cleaning, soldering, trying to remember all the things that I've done. I've done loads of different things, right? But they were just like jobs. It wasn't, I didn't have a career. And then I decided I wanted to go back to college because I needed a career. But I had no idea what I wanted to do. And by now I'm like 20, I'm 20. So I'm like, I need to try to, look, like I said, everybody runs their own race, but like, it's good to try to have a bit of an idea of what you wanted to do. But I was one of those kids that had no idea. I was just like, I don't know what I want to do. So I went to college for a careers day. And I sat down with the course advisor, and she said to me, what do you like? What do you want to do? And I was like, I don't know. But I'm interested in mechanics, like car mechanics. And she was like, well, we offer this, car mechanics course, blah, blah, blah. And, I was about to not sign on the dotted line because, it's not like a contract, but I was about to kind of pull the trigger and say, this is what I'm going to do. And then she said, but do you have any hobbies? She was just talking, and she literally said, do you have any hobbies? And I said, well, I really like music. I love music. That's what I enjoy. And she was like, well, we have this music technology course that we do here, BTEC, music technology course. And I said, oh, what's that? And so she said, oh, it's like, you know, producing music, miking up, live sound, acoustic engineering. And I said, oh, that sounds really, really interesting. So I went away, I did a little bit of research, and then I decided that's what I wanted to do. And to be honest, that is what kind of, that's what set me on the journey. So sitting down with her and deciding I wanted to do music technologies kind of sent me down this route. But yeah, to answer your question, I could have been a car mechanic, this close, man, which is quite funny because like now I have literally no idea about cars and stuff like that. I'm one of those guys that when the car breaks down, I'm like, I don't know what to do. If I take the car to the garage, they could say anything to me. They could say like, I don't know, the discombobulator has broken, and I'll be like, oh right, yeah, okay, how much it's going to cost to fix that? I literally have no idea. So yeah, like, but before that, I actually, when I was a kid, I wanted to be an airline pilot. But it's quite funny because now I hate flying, and yeah, like that would have been weird, you know, sitting in the cockpit every day hating it.
Thank you very much for that.
That's all right.
Good thing life took you down the right path then.
Yeah.
That was really good, and you know, thanks to the students for some really great questions there, some really interesting takeouts. I think for everybody, I think some of the things that I sort of heard there is, you know, remain curious. You know, if Nick hadn't remained curious about, you know, presenting, he probably wouldn't have made those applications to the BBC and pestered them. But also be, you know, you hear the word resilience a lot, but I think Nick again demonstrated that you just have to, you know, have your line of sight of what you want to go for. And, you know, if you're curious and you start to look around to see what that might, how you might get there, and, you know, you're going to get some knocks along the way. That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because everyone does. You won't be alone in that. But, you know, there'll be a day when actually the door opens. So, and networking, we know networking is so hard, you know, depending where you come from, if you don't have that kind of support around you to be able to provide that opportunity. And it's definitely something Working Options are looking at, is how we can support all the students that we work with around networking. And I think Nick gave some great advice about how you could go out and look for it yourself. So thanks for that, Nick. That was great. And I suppose before I sort of thank everybody, have you got any parting words of wisdom, Nick?
Yeah, you kind of just covered it, but I was going to say, like, on sounds cheesy, but like my junior school, this was not my secondary school, on the crest of my junior school's badge, you know, the slogan, I don't know if that's the right word, but you know, it was persevere underneath, and like that's kind of stuck with me because like in this industry and in most industries you have to persevere so much, and the knockbacks that you get will be plentiful. Believe me, they still come now for me. Like I said earlier, the point I was trying to make when I said earlier, you know, I can't just speak to somebody at BBC Sport and be like, oh, can I come and do this thing for you guys? It doesn't work like that. You know, every job is like a new job. So you know, if you get knocked back, take it on the chin. Don't get disheartened by it, because you know, some of the biggest people or people that you may think are just walking into jobs, you know, like it's easy, are still facing those same knockbacks. It's just all about how you dust yourself off and come again, really. And you know, the one thing that I try to live my life by is, just because you get told no doesn't mean no forever. It just means no right now. You know what I mean? Doesn't mean in a year's time, 2 years time, you can't regroup and come again. So just keep grafting, keep working hard, and keep pushing yourself, because the one thing that you know, worries me again is that like there's loads of people out there that have got so much potential, but they give up just before they're going to make it, or just before they're going to get the yes, or you know, they haven't given it their all to get to where they are. If you give it your all and you don't make it, cool, at least you gave it 100% in it. You don't want to give it like 80 and then it only needed that extra 20, maybe even an extra 10, like to make it to, you know, where you want to get to. So just try and make sure you give everything your all, and if you don't make it after that, fair play. You know, not everybody's going to make it. That's the harsh reality of life, right? But at least you know you've tried your hardest.
Brilliant. I think we stop there. That was great. Nick, thank you so much for taking time out to talk to all our students. Really appreciate it. And to our Student Advisory Board, thanks guys for making time to ask some great questions. So thank you very much.
Yeah, all good. And if you guys have got anything else you want to ask, you can always hit me up on socials if you didn't get around to asking anything today, or you're a bit scared because we're all on Zoom, you know, it might be easier just to DM or whatever. Just give me a shout.
Brilliant. Thanks, Nick.